All right, welcome everybody. Thanks everyone for coming out to the first May the North Be With You. The idea for this came actually driving back from Nashville from the ICCC CCC convention. But we had myself, Chris over here who does our audio, Toby Black, and Todd Thornhill stuck in a car for 14 to 15 hours with not much else to do. And we kind of really liked how the US had these meetups and stuff that were really focused on social and on people presenting about, you know, stuff they knew a whole bunch about. And that it wasn't just like a toy show you were going to. So that's what we've tried to replicate here. And we really appreciate everyone's support in the first year coming out, especially those who have flown from out west and those who have flown in from the south, from the US. So thanks a lot, everyone who came. A big thanks to all our speakers. We got our Kenner guys over here, and they'll be available for autographs during the break. And they've been just like, you know, amazing in their support for us. It's great to have them up here. And then George Irwin and Brenda Young from Kenner Canada and from Irwin Toy. And, you know, they've always been great with questions and stuff we've had for them in the past. And we're really psyched to have them here. And I want to give a big thank you to Scott Bradley and Jim McCallum, who like really helped not in just the research and putting this stuff together, but in helping to promote the event and get the word out there and just, you know, get people here. I'll go through the schedule quickly. It's posted up and around the room. So our first presentation is Jim Swearingen, and he's got a prepared presentation. He's going to go through of those early days of vintage Star Wars at Kenner and Jim's experience. And, you know, I think we all think probably like the luckiest guy in the world at that time to see Star Wars stuff before it came out and to be involved in it. Then from 10:30 to 11, we'll have a break, and Jim and Stephen will have their autograph tables open. We have some raffle items going on over there, $5 a ticket, 5 tickets for $20, and Bill will be manning that booth. Then 11 to 12, we're going to have a panel with Jim Swearingen and Stephen Geddes, and we'll talk about the early days at Kenner, how figures get made, all that sort of stuff. Lunch break from 12 to 1. We are not providing lunch, so you'll have to find your own, but there's lots of restaurants around here. 1 to 2 o'clock, we're going to have a panel with Jim McCallum and Scott Bradley, and we'll reminisce about basically buying Star Wars toys as kids in Canada and talk about their collections and learn what they have. Another break. And then our final panel will have George Irwin and Brenda Young along with Scott and Jim. And we'll, again, go back and talk about those days at Irwin Toy when they got the license, what that was like, how it was different selling stuff in Canada. And we'll probably ask them some really specific questions about work they did 40 years ago that they will have no memory of. And then we'll have break time after that. And then tonight from 7 to 10-ish is the swap meet and social, and everybody can bring stuff in. They're going to rearrange the tables, and we'll have a cash bar here as well. So during the break times, like we have this room all day long, so you're not kicked out of the room during break times. The idea is to give some time to mingle and socialize, as well as to do autographs. Later, Jim will have his book, and you'll be able to buy that and get it autographed. Yeah, so I hope you guys have fun and really enjoy it. Please take lots of pictures and post them online, make people who didn't show up jealous. And yeah, we really hope this will be the start of something and that we'll be doing more of these in the future. So now I will hand off to Jim Swearingen to go ahead with his presentation.
Good morning. Thanks for your hospitality day in Toronto. And I hope, I talk to a lot of groups. It's always fun to get people's insights, and the Canadian insights are different than ours. But so just a little bit about me. I was born on August 29, 1949. It was the same date that Russia dropped their first atomic bomb. So just a point of reference, the atomic world was started then. My first science fiction movie was Forbidden Planet. I was about 8 years old, and I was scared to death after I came out of the theater, but ended up playing about Robbie Robot and the id monster in my sandbox in the backyard. When I was 8 years old, Sputnik was launched by the Russians and the space race was on. And I tell people I've had aliens in my life for a long time. So this was my entry in a bike contest in my hometown, where it was my one-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater. And I was an artsy kid, and I tell people too that as a young kid, this was my X-Wing, my Roy Rogers stagecoach. It went over many cliffs, and the horses drowned in many ponds and things. So we'll fast forward. I was in college, the University of Cincinnati, in the co-op program in industrial design. That's how I got into toy design. In 1971, THX 1138 was George Lucas's first film that we showed at the Film Society at Cincinnati. And this was my first introduction to George Lucas. It was a post-apocalypse thing. He wrote it while he was in college and had it produced. So that was my first thing. When I started working for Kenner in 1972, not in this building in 72. We were still in 4 old warehouse buildings a couple blocks away. That's now the Justice Center. They tore them down a long time ago. But we moved into this building in 1974, and that little arrow is about where my office was. When I moved, I was working in the preliminary design department that had just been formed by Bernie Loomis. And he put together a team of people that looked at new products, inventor products, new materials, and licenses. And that's a couple of us. We had a great view of downtown Cincinnati, and we did all kinds of stuff. Kathy Kavanagh is no longer with us, but she invented Seawees, if anybody knows Seawees. She was one of the designers there, and that's me when I had hair. And one of the first licensed products was the $6 Million Man. They provided TV stuff. We were looking at footage, and then was a team of the industrial designers that came up with ideas of how to turn what we saw on the screen into a toy. And my contribution was the bionic eye. It started out as a G.I. Joe. I carved a big hole in the back of his head and cut out his eyeball and put a peephole from a door through it. And then that's in preliminary, we would turn over these very rough ideas. The arm was, we took a G.I. Joe and took a long balloon and made it the skin, and it would roll back. And all these things just got turned over to production design people. And then they had to figure out how to actually make it happen. We had the luxury of just saying, hey, it's your problem now. So they had to shorten the eyeball. We had to shorten the focal length so that you could actually look through the head because it was so short. 1973, this is the second introduction to George Lucas. His big entry into the Hollywood stuff, because he produced American Graffiti and Academy Awards and all that stuff. So this is the second thing that kind of clued me into to American Graffiti with George Lucas. But then the second issue of Starlog magazine, it was the November 6th issue. And of course, I was a little bit of a geek as a kid and as a designer. I subscribed to the movie or the magazine, and in there was a 4-paragraph article talking about 20th Century Fox and George Lucas working on a movie called Star Wars. So I read this, and several weeks later, the Star Wars, the first script came into the office. They had pitched it at Toy Fair to my boss, Dave Okada, and the marketing people, I think, and some black and white photographs came with it. I think they're here. So a book of these black and white photographs. All the live action had been done. This is probably mid-February when I got to read the script and look through the book, and I brought home that night and read it, brought it back, gave it to Dave Okada and said, go in your office and shut the door. Doesn't matter what you're working on. You need to read this. So he did. He followed direction and came out and said, we both agreed it was something we had to pursue. And at this point, they had been turned down by everybody else. Mattel, Hasbro, Ideal had all turned down the project. 3 good reasons. They had good reason. It was a movie, could be in and out of the theater in a couple days or weeks, maybe a month. And then it was science fiction. And the toy retailers in America were unhappy about what had been done to Star Trek. Ray Bradbury had turned over the licensing rights to Paramount Studios, and the product they put out was really disappointing. I don't know if any of you collect it, but pretty awful stuff. And so the retailers are like, science fiction we'll put that one away for a while. And it was opening in May. That was the 3rd strike. And we were looking at it in February, which meant only a couple months before the movie would be open. And the chances of it lasting long enough to get through Christmas was pretty, everybody's like, I'm not so sure. But luckily, I didn't have to worry about that. As a designer, my job was to pitch it to the management and pitch it to 20th Century Fox that we could do it, and to our management that we should do it. And as long as you were enthusiastic about stuff, Bernie Loomis and the management group would just let you keep going. At some point, they might have cut us off, but they luckily didn't. So we started working on projects. Yeah, there we go. So this is the way I present. This is a really bad rendition of a rendering that was presented 20th Century Fox of the first figures. This black and white with some color marker on it. Somewhere in the book I saw a better rendition of it, but this is a copy of a Xerox of a copy. So, but these are the first figures that we did, saying, well, we'll do action figures. And they turned into, well, I used these guys, Fisher-Price's Adventure People, to make these guys. So this is a quick, from going from 2D to 3D, we took Adventure People and modified them. I'm not a sculptor, Stephen will attest to that, but I used body putty and an X-Acto knife and some help from the model shop. We built the first figures. That C-3PO is just a cutout. So the first lightsaber, the way we turned it over to production to do was a spool of monofilament fishing line on his back, and it pulled out from the hilt in the hand. So you can see that in this guy. So he had one, and Darth Vader had one. The problem was that when you pulled it out, fishing line, the way it's produced, is a natural bend to it. We couldn't find a material that would come out straight. So that was engineering's problem. They came up with the double telescoping lightsaber, but these guys went through a lot of presentations. And we added, I think there's the Sand People, and I knew at one point they added the Death Star Commander, which I didn't have to deal with. And of course, the R2-D2 was built by a really great model shop. And this is the first displays. But this is all for internal and some of the preliminary presentations that we did for sales. And then this is production. And there's a tale about Bernie Loomis saying, make him this big. It's in all the well, he may have said that, but the good thing is that Adventure People were 3 3/4 inches tall too. So I think he said it between the time that we had the renderings, which were very small, and then getting to the 3 3/4. So And the way this happened, the same process went through. This was the first sketch of a bad copy of a sketch that we use for presentations. At one point, it was made into a flat drawing that the wings opened and closed just to say, this is what we're going to do. That's the first prototype. So I put this together, I did the layout drawings, and then we had some really great model makers. Almost anything that we asked them to. We went to Radio Shack and bought buttons for the light and the sound. The sound in the original one was like you're putting a playing card in the spokes of your bike. It was just a Mylar reed on a gear. But you have to remember that in 1977, your phone was still attached to the wall. And the closest thing we had red LED, which was high tech in 1977, and we put one in the X-Wing, and then that's production. So it came a long way from the very early stuff. This is the first TIE fighter. Same basic process. We were working on how to get the guy in and out of the capsule, and it has. Let's go back. This is we would define the features, and then we give it to engineering and production design people to do the final design. And in between that process, I'd be going out to get stuff from California to make it look more like the real thing. This is another project. The do-back, I show this because I was the one that invented the trap door. It's like we had figures that only had single plane articulation, and they couldn't straddle a do-back or anything else. So we put the do-back in there. And I worked on, I did the layout drawings for the first Death Star. And these are cobbled together. The cannon was started out as a tank turret, and all the added model kit stuff was kit bashed to make that. The model shop built the control panels, and the compactor used a Play-Doh extruder to make the thing compress. And then this is production. When we turned it over, they added a floor so they could do the swing. They put the swing in and added some better detail. But pretty cool. And this was done by another designer when we were finally getting better information. So this is the first prototype of the land speeder. First remote control. This R2-D2, we put a give a show projector in his chest in the front panel so that you could project Princess Leia on the wall. For cost reasons, it got cost reduced to the simple woman that they did back in the 70s. In April of 77, this is when things got really lucky for me, because we were still trying to convince the marketing people that we should really go ahead. And they said, well, then go out and get some more information. So I got to go to California. First time I'd flown to California and rented a car. I was 27, so maybe it's a little late, but I drove to the Universal Studios lot, which was where Lucasfilm had a bungalow where the marketing offices worked out. So I got to go up to the gate, and the guy with the clipboard came out and checked me in, told me where to park, and we went through reams of paper stuff that they had that I was going to bring back. Went to lunch at the commissary with people in costumes because they were shooting movies. It was like, I was like living the dream here. It was like, whoa, I'm in Hollywood. And they asked if I wanted to see dailies. And I'm like, I want to see dailies. I've read this, I've read it over and over again, and I've been playing with the toys for a while. So this is the first Light and Magic studio in Van Nuys. So we drove there. I sat in this room, not with those people, but in this room. This is where they showed dailies. So every couple days, they get some film done, and then they would go in and everybody look at it. And up on that corner, those are the shots. And they would change color when the shots were approved and all that stuff so they could keep track, all on paper. And these really lovely couches were in there, they from somebody's grandma. But so I got to go in this room, and a whole bunch of people came in, sat in the room, and the lights go down and they run the film. And down in the corner, there's some flashing lights down in this corner. The lights go back up. They all say, "Hey, great, that'll work perfectly." And I'm there going with Charlie Lippincott, and I say, "What was that?" So it was some layer of film. Because again, this is all 77. It was all done on film. And all those special effects and stuff are multiple layers of film that were added in editing. So that was my experience with dailies. And if you watched The Toys That Made Us, there's that line in there, "Oh, sorry you weren't here yesterday, blowing up the Death Star." This is what they were doing the day before I got there, is blowing up the model. There was a camera on the back of the truck. They'd blow it up and then the camera would pan by. They did shots shooting straight down from a cherry picker, but it was all done in the parking lot. Not to spoil the illusion, but the Death Star did not explode like that. But so I missed this. I saw some flashing lights. May 1st, we got an invitation to go see the first screening of the film to people, just like you and me. It was for market research. They invited 300 and some people to see Star Wars for the first time. And nobody else at Kenner could go, I guess. So I went to San Francisco and went to this theater, the North Point Theater. And on the screen, there's this thing about the premiere of Alaska. That's what people thought they were going to see, was Alaska. So 300 people, they had invited men and women, different age demographics. The 300, they come in, they've cleaned the theater. It's got clean carpet so you don't stick to the floor. They put in new THX sound system, the first one in the theater. Cleaned, it has brand new bulbs because it's not digital, it's all film. Temperature's perfect, everybody comes in and sits down and the lights go down and Lucasfilm pops on and Star Wars. And now you hear, you can hear people, "Oh, that's, Alaska." And then the crawl starts and there's some people that can't help themselves but to read out loud. So you kind of hear, this is a little low rumble. But then they have the destroyer coming overhead. And as it's coming in, the subwoofers come up. And when the engines are there, the subwoofers are as high as they can go, and everybody can feel it in their seat. So, and then it's off to the races. And when the Death Star blew up, 300 people are out of their seats cheering the rebels. And I'm there all by myself. I can't turn to anybody and say, "What did you?" So they finish the movie, the awards ceremony and all that stuff, and they hand out the market research forms that they have to fill out. And I go out in the lobby to try and find a payphone so that I can put quarters in, call back to somebody in Cincinnati and say, you missed the best movie in the world." And then the next day, this is not the next day, but the next day I went to LA. I drove from San Francisco to LA because they let me see it a second time with the press. And after that second screening, the press were not out of their seats. Maybe a few, but they're much more jaded. But coming out of that, Time magazine, this is the May 30th issue. It probably dropped about the 15th of May. And the banner was inside the year's best movie and 6 pages of color story about Star Wars. And from that that the second screening and all that was, I go back and look at that 300 people. They were the only virgins to watch Star Wars because they had no idea, unless they saw that 4-paragraph article, they had no idea what they were going to see. And this is the team of people that made Star Wars happen. These are the engineers. A couple of guys in the back are model makers. And out of this picture, half of them are gone. Same thing's happening with all the old movies, is that we're losing the actors and all the people that actually made it happen. But these guys really did an incredible job pushing Kenner to actually make the product and get it out the door, and made it possible that we could actually have stuff in time for Christmas of 78. But so these guys really did a bang up job. 1978, we went to Toy Fair. We wanted an R2-D2 for the showroom. So I had a model maker in town. We got some plans from Lucasfilm and they built me one. It wasn't remote control like some of the great ones that run around at the celebrations, but again, that's when I had hair and I'm wearing platform shoes. It's pretty exciting. These are just for fun. Jerry Springer was mayor of Cincinnati in 1978. He was declaring it Star Wars Day, in celebration of the movie, and I got to present him with his display stand with the first 12 figures. And I think there's that guy in the really bad Chewbacca is one of our PR people. But I got to present it to Jerry Springer, who was, before he was a TV personality. Now, between the two movies, I got lucky again. They were going to let us do Boba Fett as a special figure. So I got to go out with Dave Okada, he's the guy in the middle, and George Lucas showed us the first Boba Fett costume. And I took these pictures and then came back and built the first models. But I tell people this is another great experience. I got to sit down with George Lucas. I had lunch with his dog, Indiana, and Dave Okada left the meeting and went off with Gary Kurtz to talk about something. And I had an hour alone with George Lucas, which just shooting the breeze. We were talking about everything but Star Wars. He had a Frank Frazetta painting on his wall, an original of the Death Dealer, which is a big Viking on a black horse. I had the poster in my office, so I was like, I've got that poster in my office. And we're looking at, he's got a ray gun on his wall, and he talked about having a part interest in a comic book store in New York with a friend from high school. And we just talked and it's really, he at least at that time, he's a really, we're just like guys. Me and talking about Star Wars and how exciting it was to work on. And I forgot to ask him for a job. So I had things happen like that. But I came home and this is the first Kit Bashed Boba Fett. So this again, I went back to my modeling skills and carved his head from a Darth Vader. The model shop built his armor over a C-3PO body. The arms are carved with an X-Acto knife from a Stormtrooper, and I think the legs are from Death Star Commander, but they're experts that can tell you exactly what it was made out of. All the detail was body putty and then hand painted, so. And I sacrificed, I had a collection of Japanese robots, so this firing mechanism came off, it was the arm of a Japanese robot. And the model shop built the rocket packs for the side. But this guy was used for a lot of photography and presentations and all that stuff. And I wish I had it, but I don't. But he got turned over to engineering. These are just some more views of him. You can tell he's been through a lot because the paint's peeling off his joints. And that's just another a view of it. But that's a 12-inch figure. And again, the bionic eye from $6 Million Man, we used the bionic eye and put it in the helmet for the Boba Fett. Now, between the two movies, too, Jim Black was the product manager. He and I went to England. We got to see this set. They were not shooting on it, but they showed us the Hoth hangar made out of, big blocks of foam. And I don't think there were any X-Wings there, but I got to see Yoda for the first time. I wasn't allowed to take pictures, so these are all after the fact, but I was allowed to kind of doodle, so I doodled. And then I got to see Tauntauns. These are maquettes. They were used for animation. They were about 18 inches tall, but they had full-size ones. And then this is the last thing I did on Star Wars, was the Tauntaun. And again, we used the trap door. And I think then after, kind of coincidentally, I went to England with Jim Black again to see the alien. We got to see the engineer, the big set and met Hans Giger. He's as weird as his art. Got to see the full-size costume, and came back and I said, I don't think we should do this. But we wanted to keep our contacts with the film industry, so we did the 18-inch figure, and they just kind of keep us in the loop, so we'd get first right of refusal instead of being lower on the list. And then I left in 79 and a half. I went to the dark side. I became a product manager, and I took over Strawberry Shortcake in 1981 and had her as my charge for 5 years. So I've had a pretty good run in the toy business, and I've worked on lots of projects, but she was, I went from completely 180 degrees, from action figures for boys to sweet little dolls. And you'll hear from somebody that translated all the Barry talk that I wrote for packaging. So, and then you've seen Toys That Made Us. And just a plug, Sunday night, 9 o'clock, History Channel. A&E is going to they're supposed to present the action figure series from the Toys That Built America. They've been doing the thing that built America for a long time. They're doing a whole series of toy ones. The first is action figures. It's supposed to be on Sunday night. So if you have nothing better to do, we'll be in there somewhere. I have no idea what. I went into a studio and sat in front of a green screen and asked questions or answered questions from a guy that was sitting off camera, and not an interview. It was like, well, talk about this or do what it was. So I'm not expecting, I don't have very high hopes, but this one was much more, it was my dining room. So, and we toured Cincinnati. It was, got to film in the old Kroger building, and the sub-basement where the model shop used to be, and through an empty hallway that used to be ours. So I think if you're ever in Cincinnati, 9th and Court Street, this is the tribute wall to Kenner Toys. And a lot of those things I had a hand in one way or another, from Spirograph to Star Wars. So that's my conclusion. That if you are ever in town, that's a great thing. It's right near the Kroger building, so you can get a picture of the Kroger building and the mural all in one. So that's it.
Is there any questions for Jim?
Yeah. Yes.
Jim, what are the most memorable concepts you had in your Star Wars or Living Life that you can make in production?
Gosh, the most memorable thing I did that never got in the line. We presented, part of it's memory, because we did a lot of stuff, and I wasn't doing it alone. There were a lot of people putting up product. The most memorable one that was really early that got axed was a game. we had the model with the model shop built a Death Star, and it was a little like Hungry Hippos, I guess. You would the Death Star would spin around, and there was a trigger point, and you had an X-wing on a spring-loaded arm, and you'd fire it and try and hit the button that would blow it up. And it never made it, but that's one of the, I remember. We had we did the stuff that I had, a lot of it made it because the first stuff was the action figures and the X-Wing and the TIE Fighter and the Death Star. That all took time, and at the same time we worked on other stuff. Like later, as the movie was out, I was working on Strawberry Shortcake stuff in design while we were still doing Star Wars. But I luckily got to do the in-between. I met all the marketing people and George and the stuff. So I was kind of the liaison until I left the marketing department. And the marketing managers started doing the liaison. You know, the designers got kind of cut out of that process a little bit. But I had it all up front. It was really amazing. So.
Anyone else? Any other questions?
Well, if we had more time, we would have done better figures. We had amazing sculptors and all, but timing created some issues with the early stuff. They're really simple articulation. They don't do very much. Part of that was necessity of time, keeping parting lines flat, reducing the number of paint operations. We joked that if you wanted to add, like Steve talks about this, sorry, painting a stripe on a pant leg or putting the eyebrows on somebody, that cost a nickel. But if you took it off, it was 3 cents. So we always wondered where the 2 cents went. And I was like, wait a minute, you told me it was going to 5 cents if I put it on. If I take it off, it's only 3. So, but some of the limitations were there because we were, again, that's 1977 and we're working on price points. The figures retailed for $2, $3. The X-Wing fighter was $14.99. So when you go, I went out and bought one a couple of years ago, new one, for a TV thing that they were doing about the old days. And I picked one up at Toys R Us. It was $55, $57 or $55 for an X-Wing. If we had those kind of price points, it would have been able to sell itself at retail for like that. Of course, I don't know what $14.99 translates in 2022. Maybe it still would cost the same thing, but we made a lot of sacrifices, and we just didn't have that red LED, 1977, the closest thing to a computer was a calculator. Now it's, you have a whole TV station in your pocket. So it was, we did have limitations, but we dealt with them and, created a whole new world. It's like no one could, I often get asked, could you imagine? And I knew we had a great thing. No one could have imagined that there'd be an industry called Star Wars. That it wouldn't have happened. Back then they were like, yeah, it's a really good movie. And it took Kenner into the stratosphere, changed the way marketing is done for movies and toys, and it all changed with Star Wars. Now it's, and luckily now the designers are way ahead because they're working years ahead of getting things done. They get in on the movies far in advance. So they're not catching up like we were. So.
How does it feel to have been part of the creation of toys that, years and years after people are still they're very sought after and very loved?
It's pretty heady stuff. I have to admit, it really is. To be recognized, like if I go to Celebration, I've never been invited per se to Celebration, so if anybody has pull. I've gone to Celebration. I've sat on panels at Celebration, and I've met, actors and all that stuff. And to walk through a celebration, have people stop and ask you for your photograph or an autograph, it's pretty heady stuff because they reckon, well, and I've been on TV a couple times, so but it's astounding. And I love talking to people. They ask me stuff I have no idea. They're like the Boba Fett. There's a couple of guys that have written books on Boba Fett, and they know much more than I do and know every variation. I know nothing about collecting because I'm not a collector. I have a very modest collection. A good portion of it are just gifts that people have given me. When they found out I didn't have the first 12, some guys that were writing a book, Engineering the Empire, they put together a 12-piece set for me. But I collect a few of the modern stuff just because some of it's pretty cool, but I'm not a collector. But I appreciate collectors and the passion they have for it. So, and I haven't written my book yet, so. I was in Germany a month ago or so and sat down with some writers that had written books. I said, well, why haven't you written one? And it's like, well, I'm not a writer. I said, that doesn't matter. You just write it down, you can always get an editor to deal with it. But so I might put this in a book and let people read about it, because there are lots of things that, I have met some great people, some great actors, some of the characters that I've met and done stuff with. They're just, and I look at how collectors and the people that are so passionate about the movies and stuff, how they want to know the minutia. They want to meet everybody that basically touched Star Wars in some way. And I think that's just amazing. So, a couple more.
Did this almost not happen?
Well, it could have not happened. Because the Mattels and all the people that had turned it down had those three good reasons. It was a movie. Movies didn't last that long. It was science fiction. Star Trek really screwed up the licensing of science fiction for a while because of the junk they put out initially, not the newer stuff. And it was in May, and some people had seen it earlier. Mattel, the story that I heard internally is that Bernie signed the contract, put his signature on the contract, the same day that the shareholders were having a meeting in California, and the board they were explaining to the shareholders why they had not got the license. So the story I heard was he timed it for the same day that they were explaining because he knew it was going to happen, and that he took great pleasure in signing the thing for Kenner since he had left Mattel. So, but it could have been the same problem because it didn't make sense from a toy point of view because it was opening in May. The toy season is September to December. The chances of it being in the theater then, even now, have been very rare things that have gone a full cycle. And it was in the theater's first run for over a year. So that nobody had that foresight. That wasn't going to happen. But Bernie also had the foresight to, there were a bunch of passionate designers and our boss fighting for it every week. We would present something new every week. We had weekly meetings and we would present some other idea. And but Bernie wouldn't, there would be a point where he'd say, not enough, I'm not seeing it anymore. But he let people go for quite a while before, especially if you're like, no, you. And when I got to come back from Cincinnati and say, I can't tell you what I just saw, and I can't pass it on, but this is incredible.
That gives you a lot more confidence after seeing the movie.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we made a good bet.
Oh yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
No, I did, and I didn't have any responsibility. Preliminary design had we were supposed to do what we did, keep on us until we say to stop. And Bernie didn't let that. He wouldn't cut you off. And I think that's what happened at some of the companies, is that the wrong people looked at it and said, movie, science fiction, we can't deal with it. Because we didn't have any real product until after Christmas. We did plaints and dip dots. And I think we might have done dream drops. I'm not sure. We had paint stuff. And we did a flat board game that was basically paper. And and I think that's about all we did for Christmas of '77, and the early bird, which was another, that was somebody else's idea. But I mean, that was pretty ballsy. I mean, Bernie Loomis, the idea was, there's a couple people that say they presented in the meeting, and Bernie said, yeah, let's try it. And he was like, nobody else is doing it. And it wasn't like they sold millions of them. They sold lots of them, but the thing was, they got a news story in every town that there was this outrage about how could Kenner Toys sell an empty envelope for Christmas? But it got you lots of PR. So people were, the more people hear a story like, oh my gosh, the more they want it. So they got a lot of PR. And then when the product came out, they couldn't keep it on the shelf. So
Like the first Kickstarter, like that.
yeah.
Pre-selling something.
A Kickstarter on paper.
Yeah.
Nah.
One more question, if anyone's got it.
So
Jim.
I'll answer more at my table if you have questions.
Yeah, that's what the break time.
I'm here all
Out of
day.
the first 12, which one do you have the most affinity for?
C-3PO.
Like,
Yeah. Somehow I kind of picture myself like C-3PO somehow. We have an affinity. I actually met him in Germany last month. I've been close to him in other places, but we actually met. He came to my table. So he came to me instead of the other way around. He's a very nice guy, but so that's my guy. Plus I love the sculpture on this figure. That's an unusual one because it was done in acetate, right? The big one was done in acetate. Yeah. But he's my guy. I mean, all the other ones are fun, and he's been in all the movies. So he's been in all the, nobody else has lasted that long. That character's been in more movies. All right.
Well,
Thanks. And stop by if you have other questions. Love to talk to you.
well, thanks a lot to Jim. And so we'll be taking about a half-hour break now. The autograph tables will be open.